On a cold March evening in 1922, deep in the Bavarian countryside of Germany, the Gruber family sat quietly inside their farmhouse. The world outside was frozen. Snow stretched endlessly across the fields, and the silence of the woods pressed against the windows like a shadow that refused to leave. But inside this quiet house, something was wrong, terribly wrong. For weeks, unsettling events had haunted the farmstead known as Hinterkaifeck. Strange footprints appeared in the snow, leading from the edge of the forest straight to the house, but curiously, none led back. The family's keys began to vanish. In the dead of night, muffled footsteps echoed in the attic, yet when the rooms were searched, no intruder was found. It was as if the farm itself was breathing, alive with something unseen, something patient, something waiting. Andreas Gruber, the stern 63-year-old patriarch, brushed it off at first. But he couldn't ignore it forever. He confided to neighbors about the sounds above his ceiling, about the footprints, about doors found mysteriously open. He even told them that perhaps someone had moved into the house, hiding in the shadows. But no one believed him. The family went on with their lives. Andreas lived with his wife Kazalia, their widowed daughter Victoria, and Victoria's two young children. Life on the farm was harsh, but ordinary, until the fear began to take root. One winter night, Victoria awoke to the sound of shuffling overhead. She clutched her daughter tightly, staring at the ceiling, knowing someone was there. And yet, the next morning, nothing. No proof. Just whispers in the silence. Neighbors began to notice the Grubers acting nervous, locking doors earlier, speaking in hushed tones. But the farm remained isolated, surrounded by thick woods, far from the safety of town. And then, something happened that no one could explain. The family's maid abruptly quit. She told friends she could not stand the house anymore, that it was haunted. She spoke of footsteps when no one was there, of strange voices in the walls. She left in fear, refusing ever to return. Andreas Gruber, stubborn and skeptical, dismissed her fears. He stayed. The family stayed. But the woods around Hinterkaifeck were closing in. Days later, new footprints appeared in the snow. They came from the forest. They stopped at the barn. And again, none returned. That same week, the Grubers noticed one of their keys was missing. Then another. Andreas began to feel a chill not from the winter air, but from something unseen in his own home. Inside the farmhouse, objects shifted. The family would leave something in one place, and later find it somewhere else. A newspaper appeared on their doorstep, one they did not subscribe to, and no one in the area admitted to leaving it. The tension in the house grew unbearable. Each night, the family lay in bed, staring into the dark, wondering if someone was watching. Victoria began confiding to friends that she feared they were being hunted. And then came the silence. On the evening of March 31, 1922, something unimaginable happened. It began in the barn. The youngest daughter, little Kazalia, was restless that night. She thought she heard someone outside. One by one, the family stepped out into the cold darkness. One by one, they were lured into the barn. No one would see them alive again. When neighbors visited the farm days later, the house was eerily quiet. Smoke no longer rose from the chimney. The animals went unfed. Mail piled up at the door. Suspicion grew, and when they finally entered the barn, what they found would scar them for life. The scene inside the barn was beyond comprehension. Something out of a nightmare, a blood-soaked secret buried under straw and silence. And it was only the beginning, because what investigators would uncover at Hinterkaifeck defied reason, and even today, remains one of the most terrifying mysteries in true crime history. The barn was silent. Dust floated in the air. The smell of hay mixed with something far darker, something metallic, something rotten. When the neighbors stepped inside, lanterns trembling in their hands, they stopped cold. Under a rough pile of hay and wooden boards lay the Gruber family, murdered. Andreas Gruber, the patriarch, was found first. His face was shattered, unrecognizable, beaten with a weapon so heavy it crushed bone. Beside him lay his wife Kazalia, her skull split open, her body twisted unnaturally. Victoria, their daughter, was beside them, her body showing signs of a struggle, her face frozen in terror. And then, perhaps most hauntingly, young Kazalia, just 7 years old. She was still warm when she was discovered, but she had not died instantly. She had lived long enough to tear out tufts of her own hair in agony before death claimed her. The neighbors stumbled backward, their hearts racing, unable to comprehend the savagery before them. But the horror wasn't over. Inside the farmhouse, 2 more bodies were found. Joseph, the 2-year-old son of Victoria, lay dead in his crib. The maid, who had replaced the one who fled, was murdered in her bed. Her life ended almost as soon as it had begun on the farm. 6 people, an entire family, slaughtered. And yet, the strangest detail was not that they had been killed. It was what came after. The killer, or killers, had stayed. The animals were fed. Meals were eaten from the kitchen. Footprints and signs showed someone had remained in the house, moving silently through the rooms, living among the corpses. Days passed before anyone dared enter, and still, the murderer remained undetected. Investigators were baffled. The weapon, it seemed, was a mattock, an old farming tool, sharpened and swung with unthinkable brutality. But why? Who could hate this family so much? Neighbors whispered about Andreas Gruber. He was known to be harsh, even cruel. Some claimed he was abusive, controlling, and had enemies. Others hinted at darker family secrets. That Victoria, his widowed daughter, had an improper relationship with him, and that little Joseph might not be the son of her late husband, but of Andreas himself. But were these only cruel rumors, or motives for murder? Suspicion spread quickly. Some thought it was a robbery, but nothing of value had been taken. Money was still in the house. Gold and coins were untouched. Whoever killed the Grubers hadn't come for riches. They had come for blood. As the investigation deepened, The timeline grew even more chilling. The last confirmed sighting of the family alive was March 31st. After that, neighbors saw smoke rising from the chimney. They heard the sounds of animals being tended. They even noticed bread being baked. All while the Grubers lay dead in the barn. The killer had not only murdered them, he had moved into their home, carried on their lives, and vanished back into the woods like a phantom. The case quickly spread fear throughout the entire region. People locked their doors. They whispered that the devil himself had walked through Hinterkaifeck. But investigators wanted answers. They began questioning neighbors, relatives, farmhands, anyone who might have held a grudge. Dozens were interviewed. Several suspects emerged, each more unsettling than the last. There was Lorenz Schlittenbauer, a neighbor with a complicated past with Victoria. Some believed he was Joseph's true father. Others thought he had quarreled with Andreas and sought revenge. He was even among those who discovered the bodies. Suspicion clung to him, but evidence was thin. Other suspects included ex-servants, vagrants, even soldiers returning from war. Each theory seemed plausible, but none could be proven. And so the case only grew stranger. The crime scene itself was eerie. The footprints in the snow, the missing keys, the noises in the attic. It was as if someone had been planning this for weeks, maybe months. Watching, waiting. But the most haunting question of all was not how the family was killed. It was how the killer remained unseen in a small village, inside a farmhouse, for days, without anyone noticing. The more investigators uncovered, the darker the case became. Because evidence suggested the murders had not been random. They had been intimate, personal. Whoever swung that weapon had looked the Grubers in the eye before ending their lives. And as theories swirled, neighbors began to fear the unthinkable, that the murderer might still be among them. The people of Kaifeck whispered to each other in terror. The forest seemed darker. Every creak of wood, every crunch of snow outside their doors filled them with dread. If such horror could happen at Hinterkaifeck, it could happen anywhere. And then, the investigation revealed something else. A detail that suggested the killer wasn't just hiding in the woods. They may have been inside the house, all along. The walls of Hinterkaifeck held more secrets than anyone dared to admit. And as suspicion turned to paranoia, investigators realized this was no ordinary crime. The farm was cursed with a darkness that refused to be explained. And the true terror was yet to come. Discovery that the killer had lived inside the farmhouse shocked everyone. Imagine it. The family dead in the barn, yet smoke curling from the chimney, bread fresh in the oven, the animals fed as though nothing had happened. Someone had made Hinterkaifeck their home. But who? The police, desperate for answers, began combing through the evidence. They brought in dogs, searched the barn, the fields, even the woods. But there was nothing. No tracks leaving the farm, no sign of escape. It was as if the killer had vanished into thin air. Suspicions turned toward the neighbors. At the center of it was Lorenz Schlittenbauer, the man with ties to Victoria. Some whispered that Joseph, the 2-year-old, was his son, not Andreas's. If true, it gave him both motive and rage. Lorenz had also been among the first to enter the farm after the murders. Witnesses said he moved with ease through the house, unlocking doors that should have been locked, as if he knew the place better than anyone realized. Did he have the missing keys? Had he been inside before the neighbors arrived? Still, no proof could link him. And so the rumors grew darker. Some villagers began to believe the killer was not an outsider at all, but someone the family had welcomed. Maybe even someone already living inside the walls. Theories spiraled. A former farmhand, dismissed in anger, returning for revenge. Soldiers, hardened by the Great War, committing atrocities in their homeland. A drifter, drawn to the isolated farm, consumed by madness. Or worse, a member of the family itself. Each possibility was more disturbing than the last. Police interrogated hundreds of people. At one point, they believed they had a breakthrough. A woman reported overhearing a man in a nearby village bragging about the murders. He described details only the killer could have known. But when questioned, his story collapsed. He was dismissed as a liar seeking attention. The investigation dragged on. Forensics science in 1922 was primitive. No fingerprints, no DNA, no cameras in every corner as we have today. Just blood, suspicion, and silence. Years passed. The farmhouse, once filled with the sounds of life, became a place of nightmares. Locals avoided it, crossing themselves when they passed, whispering that it was cursed. Children dared each other to peek through the broken windows. Inside, dust gathered, and the shadows grew heavier. Finally, the house was torn down. But even as the walls fell, the mystery did not. To this day, the case remains unsolved. And yet, the legends endure. Some say the killer was Schlittenbauer, the jealous neighbor who wanted Victoria and resented Andreas. Others say it was a stranger, a madman who slipped back into the forest, never to be seen again. Still others whisper that the evil was born inside the family itself, that the Gruber's secrets had consumed them, and the murders were only the final act in a story of sin and shame. But perhaps the most chilling theory of all is this: that the killer never left Hinterkaifeck. That when the neighbors arrived, when the investigators swarmed, when the bodies were carried away, he was still there, hiding in the shadows, watching. Even now, more than a century later, the case grips us. Because the truth was never found. The murderer walked away. Somewhere in the world, he lived out his days, free. And the question that lingers is the same one that haunted Bavaria in 1922. Who was the devil in the woods? The Hinterkaifeck murders remain one of the most terrifying mysteries in true crime history. 6 lives, stolen in the dead of night. A killer who lived among the dead. And a silence that has never been broken. Some stories are told and forgotten. But Hinterkaifeck is eternal. Evil leaves no footprints, but its shadow never fades.